He woke up in a bed that wasn't his. Silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows, a city skyline 30 floors below him, like something out of a dream he didn't remember having, and beside him, a woman he didn't know. Logan Mercer sat up slowly, heart hammering, trying to piece together a night that had completely vanished from his memory. His phone showed 17 missed calls. His daughter's sitter, his brother, 2 numbers he didn't recognize. Then the old phone buzzed, the one he kept in his jacket pocket, the one that had belonged to his dead wife. A single message from an unknown number. They killed her, and now they know you have the journals. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to wake up inside someone else's nightmare, stay with me. Because this story doesn't just have twists, it has the kind of truth that changes everything. Hit that like button, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. Part 1. The morning after. The alarm on Logan Mercer's phone was set for 6:15 every morning without exception, because Emma needed to be at school by 8, and she was the kind of kid who took 45 minutes to decide which socks to wear. He knew this. He planned for it. He had been planning for it every single day for the past 3 years, ever since it became just the two of them, and the morning stopped being something he looked forward to and became something he simply got through. So when Logan opened his eyes, and the ceiling above him was not the water-stained drywall of his rental house in Clarkton, Virginia, something inside his chest went very, very still. The ceiling was white and perfectly smooth. The light coming through the windows was early morning gray, soft and diffused, the kind that meant sunrise was maybe 20 minutes away. He was lying in a bed so large it felt almost architectural, not just a piece of furniture, but a statement, a room within a room, all crisp linen and cool air that smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive he couldn't name. He sat up. His head throbbed once, hard, like someone had tapped the back of his skull with a rubber mallet. He was still wearing his shirt, his jeans, one shoe. The other was somewhere across the room. He could see it near a marble-topped console table that probably cost more than 3 months of his rent. He looked to his right. A woman was asleep on the far side of the bed, her back to him, dark hair spread across the pillow. She was fully dressed too. A silk blouse, dark trousers, bare feet, like she had simply lain down at some point and stopped moving. Logan stared at her for a moment. His brain was working very slowly, the way it did when you were fighting through something pharmaceutical rather than just tired. He pressed his fingers to his temples, tried to think backward. Yesterday had been Wednesday. He remembered Wednesday morning clearly. Burnt toast, Emma's missing library book, the argument over whether cartoon wolves counted as educational content. He remembered dropping her at school. He remembered driving to the Hargrove renovation site and arguing with the tile contractor about grout lines for an hour and a half. He remembered eating a sad vending machine sandwich at 2 in the afternoon. After that, things got blurry. He had gotten a call. Afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock. Someone who said they knew about Claire. Claire, his wife. Dead 2 years and 4 months ago, a car accident on Route 9 in November. The kind of night with rain and black ice and a tractor trailer that drifted across the center line. The police report had been 14 pages and had told him almost nothing useful, except that she was gone and that it had been fast. He'd thought he was past the stage where a stranger mentioning her name could pull the ground out from under him. Apparently he was wrong. The call had told him to come to a hotel in Washington, D.C., the Callaway. Someone wanted to show him something about Claire, something important. He'd called Mrs. Patterson next door, asked if Emma could stay the night, told her it was a work emergency. He'd driven 90 minutes to D.C., wondering the whole way if he was making a catastrophically stupid decision. And then, nothing. A bar downstairs. A drink he ordered, and maybe didn't finish. And then nothing at all until this ceiling. Logan swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat still for a moment, letting the room stop moving. Then he checked his phone. 6:04 a.m. 17 missed calls. Mrs. Patterson twice. His brother Derek 4 times. 2 unknown numbers, the same one, calling at 11:15 p.m. and again at 2:40 a.m. And then he felt it. The second phone. The one he carried in his inside jacket pocket the way other people carried a photograph in their wallet. Claire's phone. It had been off, locked, kept charged out of habit or grief or some combination of the two that he had never fully sorted out. He'd never been able to bring himself to cancel the plan or clear out her apps or do any of the sensible, final things that people told him he should do. He pulled it out. The screen was on. He didn't understand that at first. He had not turned it on. There was a notification on the screen, a text message from a number that showed up only as 11 digits with no name attached. He opened it. They killed her. And now they know you have the journals. Logan read the message 3 times. His pulse was doing something uncomfortable in his ears. He didn't have any journals. He had no idea what that meant. Behind him, the woman in the bed moved. He heard fabric shift, a quiet exhale, and then the particular stillness of someone who has just woken up and is trying to figure out where they are. "Don't scream," Logan said, without turning around. "I'm equally confused." A pause. "I wasn't going to scream." Her voice was low and very controlled, the voice of someone who was keeping something, adrenaline, alarm, something, carefully locked down. "I was going to ask who you are." "Logan Mercer." He turned around slowly. "I do residential renovation. I live in Clarkton, Virginia. I have absolutely no idea how I got here or where here actually is." She was sitting up now, looking at him with dark eyes that were doing a rapid, unsentimental assessment of him, the way someone might evaluate an unexpected variable in a calculation they thought was finished. She was striking in the way that certain people were striking. Not delicate, not soft, but with a quality of complete self-possession that made her more compelling than conventionally beautiful. There was a bruise forming at the edge of her right cheekbone that she had not yet noticed or was choosing not to acknowledge. "This is the penthouse suite at the Callaway," she said. "Floor 31. She paused, like she was deciding something. "I'm Vivian Sterling." Logan recognized the name approximately 1 second after she said it. He did not do a great job of hiding that. "The tech company," he said. "The tech company." A very dry emphasis on the repetition. "Meridian Systems, yes, among other things." He'd seen her face on a magazine cover in his dentist's office 6 months ago. Something about the 20 most powerful women in American business. She'd looked serene in the photograph. In person, she looked like someone who had just walked out of something that hadn't gone the way she planned and was deciding how to respond to that. "Do you remember anything?" he asked. "I remember being here for a board dinner." She was quiet for a moment. "I remember getting a message telling me there was a security issue I needed to address personally. I came up to the suite expecting to meet my security director." She touched the bruise at her cheek very lightly with 2 fingers. "I don't remember anything after I walked through the door." Logan turned Claire's phone over in his hands. "Somebody lured both of us here," he said, "and drugged us. That seems to be the shape of it." He showed her the message on Claire's phone. She read it twice without expression. "Whose phone is that?" "My wife's. She's been dead for 2 years. Vivian Sterling looked at him then in a way that was different from the calculation of before. Quieter. Less processed. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it, which he noticed. "I need to figure out what this means, and I need to figure out what journals they're talking about, and I need to call my daughter." He stood up, found his second shoe, put it on. "And I need to know if you have any enemies who would go to this much trouble." She let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. "I need a longer answer to that question than I have time for right now." Logan called Mrs. Patterson from the elevator. Emma was fine, had eaten breakfast, was watching cartoons, was asking when her dad was coming home. He told Mrs. Patterson he'd be there by afternoon and tried to sound more certain than he felt. He called Derek from the lobby. "Where are you?" Derek's voice had that specific tension of someone who had been awake most of the night. He was 2 years older than Logan, a former Army sergeant turned contractor, the kind of man who handled crisis by becoming very quiet and very direct. "I've been calling you since 10 o'clock. "Washington, the Callaway." "Something happened." "I'm okay, I'll explain later." "What's going on?" "Someone broke into your house last night." Logan stopped walking. A couple in business clothes moved around him without looking up from their phones. "What?" Mrs. Patterson called me when she couldn't reach you. She heard something through the wall, checked with Emma. Emma was fine, but your back door was open and someone went through your office. Derek's voice was very level. The filing cabinet was open. Your desk was taken apart. Nothing obviously stolen, but whoever did it wasn't subtle. Was Emma? Emma was next door the whole night. She's fine. Logan, she's fine. He stood in the middle of the Callaway lobby and pressed his hand flat against his chest, feeling his heart knock against his palm. They were looking for the journals, he said quietly. What journals? I don't know yet. Vivian Sterling had her assistant on the phone before they reached the street. She was talking quietly and quickly, the kind of conversation that wasn't a request so much as a series of instructions being delivered with surgical precision. When she finished, she looked at Logan. My security team is doing a sweep of the building and my car is compromised. They found a tracker under the wheel well. She said this the way other people said their coffee order was wrong. I have another car 2 blocks north. Where are you going? Clarkton, Virginia. I have to get to my daughter, and I have to figure out what was in my house. She nodded once. I'll drive with you. You don't have to do that. Someone drugged me and put a bruise on my face and put a tracking device on my vehicle, she said. I'm not going back to my office until I know what I'm walking into. And you know something about whatever this is, even if you don't know you know it yet. She paused. I'm not asking to move into your house. I'm asking for a car ride. Logan looked at her for a moment. Okay, he said. He had spent 2 years in a state of compressed functional grief, doing what needed to be done, keeping Emma steady, not falling apart during breakfast or bedtime or the long Sunday afternoons that used to be the best part of the week. He had gotten very good at taking the next necessary step without letting himself think too hard about whether he wanted to. This was a next necessary step. He took it. The drive to Clarkton was 2 hours in morning traffic. Vivian's car was a black SUV driven by a man named Charles, who had the build of someone who had once done something more serious than driving and had never entirely stopped. Vivian sat in the back with Logan and spent the first 40 minutes on her phone working through what Logan gathered was a substantial amount of damage control. Her voice never rose. She never used a word where a shorter one would do. He found himself watching her sideways without meaning to. You're staring, she said, without looking up from her phone. Sorry. He looked out the window. How does someone get to where you are and still not know who's coming for them? She was quiet for a second. You build something successful, and the bigger it gets, the more people want pieces of it. After a while, you can't keep track of all the hands reaching for you. She set the phone in her lap. I've had competitors try to buy me out, sue me, steal my people, run disinformation campaigns through trade press. It's background noise. It stops feeling threatening after a while. She touched the bruise at her cheek again. This feels different. It is different, he said, if this is connected to what happened to Claire. Tell me about her. He hadn't expected that, not the bluntness of it. Most people skirted around Claire the way you skirted around a piece of furniture in a dark room. Careful, cautious, afraid of making something worse. Vivian asked like she actually wanted to know. She was an investigative journalist, he said. Freelance, she covered financial crimes mostly. Shell companies, offshore accounts, nonprofits that weren't what they claimed to be. He watched the highway signs slide past. She was good at it, patient. She had this thing where she'd sit on a story for months, years sometimes, until she had everything she needed. She said the story never got away from her. She let it believe it was free until she was ready to close. Vivian was listening in a way that felt intentional, like she was filing things carefully. The accident, he said. November, 2 years ago. She was driving back from D.C. The official report said a truck crossed the median. Black ice, poor visibility. He paused. I believe that. I had no reason not to. He pulled Claire's phone from his pocket and held it. Until last night. His house in Clarkton was a 1940s craftsman on a street of similar houses, the kind of neighborhood where people left their porch lights on and knew each other's dogs by name. He had bought it the year Emma started kindergarten, partly because of the school district and partly because Claire had loved the porch. Mrs. Patterson was waiting on that porch when the SUV pulled up. She was 71 years old, wide-hipped, with the no-nonsense warmth of someone who had raised 4 children and retained the competence without losing the softness. Emma was beside her. Emma was 8 years old and built like Claire, wiry and quick, with Claire's dark eyes and a mouth that was always slightly ahead of the thought behind it. She took one look at Logan getting out of an expensive black SUV, and her face went through approximately 6 expressions in the span of 2 seconds. "Dad!" She jumped off the porch steps. He caught her before she reached the bottom. She was at the age where hugging her father in front of witnesses required that it be quick and slightly performative in its casualness. But she held on a second longer than she would have admitted to, and he held on longer than that. "Where were you? Mrs. Patterson said you had a work thing, but she looked worried." "I had a work thing," he confirmed. "I'm here now." "Someone went in our house." "I know." He set her down, kept a hand on her shoulder. "Did you go inside?" "Mrs. Patterson wouldn't let me." The slight indignation of that. "She said to wait for you." Emma looked past him at the SUV where Vivian Sterling was getting out with the careful balance of someone whose head was still slightly off from whatever had been slipped into their drink the night before. "Who's that?" "A colleague." "Emma, I need you to stay with Mrs. Patterson a little longer while I check the house. Okay?" Emma was looking at Vivian with the focused attention of a child who had categorized the adult as interesting. "She has a bruise on her face." "I'm aware." "Did you get in a fight?" "Emma, I'm just asking." Vivian had reached them. She looked down at Emma with a brief, unreadable expression, and then she said, "We both had a confusing night. Your dad got out of it better than I did." Emma considered this. "My dad's good in a crisis," she said, with a matter-of-factness that was almost heartbreaking. "He's had a lot of practice." She went back inside with Mrs. Patterson without further commentary. Logan watched her go. "She's something," Vivian said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "She is." The back door had been pried open with something flat and thin. A knife, possibly, or a specialized tool. Whoever had done it was not rough about it. There was minimal damage to the frame, which meant they hadn't wanted it to look like a break-in, only hadn't succeeded entirely. Logan walked through his office slowly. The filing cabinet was open, the drawers pulled out and replaced in slightly wrong positions, close but off by an inch or two. His desk drawers had been gone through in the same careful but hurried way. His bookshelf had been skimmed, volumes replaced at wrong angles. They had been looking for something specific and had not found it. He stood in the middle of the room and thought. The journals the message had referenced, something Claire had left. He had gone through her things in the months after she died. Not everything, not all at once because he couldn't, but he had gone through her office, her laptop, her notebooks. He had found story notes, research files, interview transcripts. He had stored them in boxes in the attic because he couldn't throw them away and couldn't bring himself to read them. "The attic," he said. Vivian, standing in the doorway, said nothing. He pulled down the attic stairs from the ceiling and climbed up. The attic was insulated but not climate-controlled, packed with the quiet archaeology of a family's accumulated years. Christmas boxes, Emma's first bike, crates of books, Logan's grandfather's tools in a rusted chest. And against the far wall where he had stacked them with care and then never opened them again, 4 cardboard boxes marked in Claire's handwriting. Research, 2019 to 2022. He sat on the floor of his own attic in the early morning light and opened the first box. There were notebooks, 12 of them, the kind with plain black covers that Claire had bought in bulk from an office supply store. Neat, dense handwriting, dates running across 3 years. There were printed documents, hundreds of pages, with highlighter and margin notes, wire transfer records, corporate filings, photographs printed from what looked like security camera footage. There was a list of names. He did not recognize any of them immediately. But at the top of one page, underlined twice, was the name of an organization he had seen once or twice in passing and thought nothing of. Brightwell Foundation, 2020 onward. Beneath it, in Claire's writing, follow the children's funds. Where does it actually go? And below that, in red ink, clearly added later, they know I'm close. I think they're watching the house. Logan sat very still. The entry was dated 3 weeks before the accident on Route 9. He sat there for a long moment with the notebook in his hands and felt something shifting inside his chest. Not grief, not exactly. Something older and colder and more specific than grief. The particular quality of understanding that you have been told a lie for a long time and are only now seeing the shape of it. He climbed back down the attic stairs with the notebook in his hand. Vivian Sterling was still in the doorway of his office. She had poured herself a glass of water from the kitchen and was holding it, watching him. He showed her the page. She read it. Her expression did not change in any visible way, but something behind her eyes did. A small, careful adjustment, the look of someone who had just connected two things that changed the picture significantly. Brightwell Foundation, she said. You know it? I know Marcus Vance. He runs it. Her voice was very measured. He's been on the cover of every business publication in this country. Philanthropy, children's health initiatives, clean water programs in developing countries. She paused. He gave a commencement address at my alma mater 2 years ago. 14 minutes of standing ovations. Logan looked at the notebook in his hand. My wife spent 3 years building a case against him, he said, and then she died on a back road in Virginia on a November night. The morning light was coming through the office window now, thin and winter pale, falling across Claire's handwriting like something that had been waiting to be read for a long time. I need to go through all of these, Logan said. Everything she left. So do I, Vivian said. She wasn't asking permission exactly, but she wasn't assuming it either. He looked at her. This woman he had woken up beside in a hotel room 48 hours into what he suspected was going to be the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to him. Someone had chosen to put them in the same room together, and he didn't fully understand why yet. You don't know what you're getting into, he said. I know that someone put a tracker on my car and a bruise on my face, she said. I know they expected me to be scared and go home. She set the water glass down on the edge of his desk. I don't go home when I'm scared. I never have. He almost said something about that, chose not to. I need to call my brother, he said instead. He's going to want to know what's happening, and he's going to think I've lost my mind. Have you? He looked at Claire's notebooks stacked in the box from the attic. 23 years of her neat, careful handwriting full of secrets that people had killed to keep buried. Not yet, he said. Derek arrived at 2 in the afternoon. He took one look at the situation. The pried back door, the boxes from the attic spread across the dining room table, Logan and a woman he had never seen before sorting through notebooks with the focused intensity of people who have not eaten since yesterday. And he stood in the doorway for a very long moment. I need someone to tell me what's happening, he said. Logan told him. All of it. The call about Claire, the drive to D.C., the hotel, the message on Claire's phone, Vivian, the break-in, the attic boxes and what was in them. Derek listened without interrupting, which was his way. He had the capacity to receive information without reacting to it in real time, a quality Logan had always envied and never fully managed himself. When Logan finished, Derek was quiet for about 10 seconds. Okay, Derek said. That's it? Okay? I'm processing. He looked at Vivian, who was reading a highlighted printout at the far end of the table. You're Vivian Sterling. Yes. Your company's worth about $30 billion. Give or take. Derek looked at his brother. And someone drugged you both and left you in a hotel room together. Apparently. To what end? We don't know yet. To get us away from somewhere. To get into this house. Maybe to discredit one or both of us if they needed to later. A photo of the two of us in a hotel room might have uses. Logan rubbed the back of his neck. We haven't gotten there yet. Derek pulled out a chair and sat down. He picked up one of Claire's notebooks and looked at the cover without opening it. And something in his face went briefly, privately painful, and then came back. What do you need? He said. I need someone who can help verify this financial documentation without going through any channels that might tip off the wrong people. And I need someone to stay close to Emma. I can do both, Derek said, without hesitation. Logan nodded. He had known he would say that. That was the thing about Derek. He was always there when it counted, and he never made you ask twice. Vivian looked up from the printout. I have a contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission, a former classmate. She's not on anyone's payroll except the government's, and I'd trust her with my life. She paused. Or at least my financial documentation. You haven't trusted people easily in a while, Logan said. It wasn't a challenge. It was just something he had gathered from watching her. She looked at him. No, she said. I haven't. Why now? She was quiet for a moment, then she looked back at the printout. Because your wife spent 3 years on this and died for it, and whatever she was protecting matters more than my instinct to keep everything close. She turned a page. And because something about this morning felt like a beginning, even though it shouldn't have. Logan didn't answer that. He picked up the notebook marked with the red ink warning and opened it to the first page. Claire had written, in her clear, practical hand, a single sentence at the top as a kind of heading. Some things don't let you walk away until they're finished. He sat there for a moment with his dead wife's words in his hands, in his house, at a table that held the beginning of something he could not yet see the end of. Emma was next door with Mrs. Patterson. His brother was reading a document beside him. A woman he had met 8 hours ago was decoding financial evidence with the focused intelligence of someone who had built a billion-dollar company from a laptop and a good idea. Outside the window, his porch, Claire's porch, caught the afternoon light. He turned to the next page, and he began to read. By the time the light outside went from afternoon gold to the flat gray of early evening, Logan had read through 4 of Claire's notebooks and felt like someone had reached into his chest and rearranged the furniture. It wasn't the information itself that got to him, though the information was damning enough. It was the voice. Claire's voice in her handwriting, the way she phrased things. That dry, precise economy she had when she was working, stripping a sentence down to exactly what it needed to be and nothing more. Reading her notes felt like sitting in the same room with her, like she was just in the next room and would come back in a minute with coffee and that particular look she got when she'd found something. He had to stop twice and stand at the kitchen window and look at the yard until the feeling passed. The notebooks formed a timeline that went back further than he had known. Claire had started following Brightwell Foundation in the spring of 2020 when she'd noticed a discrepancy in their publicly filed tax documents, a rounding in the overhead numbers that was small enough to be an accident but appeared too consistently across too many quarters to be anything other than intentional. She'd flagged it in a margin note. This is either sloppiness or someone doing this on purpose and counting on no one doing the math. Claire had done the math. Over the next 18 months, she had built a picture, piece by piece, the way Logan had watched her work before, quietly, methodically, following one thread to the next without announcing what she was doing to anyone. She had filed public records requests. She had cultivated sources inside 3 different financial auditing firms. She had traced the flow of charitable donations through a labyrinth of subsidiary organizations and numbered accounts across 4 countries. And what she had found was not complicated in concept, even if it was staggering in scale. Brightwell Foundation had raised, over 5 years, approximately $460 million in charitable donations. It was publicly known as one of the premier philanthropic organizations in the country: children's health programs, clean water initiatives, education funding in underserved communities. The kind of organization that appeared at galas and state dinners. The kind whose founder got standing ovations at commencement addresses. Of that $460 million, Claire had documented evidence that roughly $280 million had never reached any of the programs it was designated for. It had disappeared into a network of shell companies, some of them real operating businesses, some of them nothing more than names on incorporation documents in jurisdictions with lax reporting requirements. From there, the money moved again, into real estate holdings, into private investment accounts, into what appeared to be payments to a rotating cast of business entities that Logan could not yet identify. There was a second layer beneath that. It was the layer that Claire had written about in red ink. She had found payments, disguised as consulting fees and contractor invoices, going to a set of names she had identified as mid-level executives at 3 different companies. At first she thought it was standard graft, the usual arrangement where someone in procurement steers contracts to a friendly vendor in exchange for a cut. But the scale didn't fit that explanation, and the pattern was wrong. The payments were too regular, too consistent, and some of the names were appearing in contexts that had nothing to do with finance. In the last notebook, the one with the most recent dates, Claire had written, "I think this is bigger than fraud. The money is moving, but some of it is buying access. Access to what exactly I don't have yet. But the kind of access you pay this much for isn't access to a market or a contract. It's access to people." Underneath that, in the red ink, called D today. "He says I should stop. I told him I can't." Logan stared at that line for a long time. He did not know who D was. "Hey," Vivian's voice from across the table, quiet. "You went somewhere." "Reading," he said. "You stopped turning pages 4 minutes ago." He looked up. Derek had taken Emma next door for dinner an hour earlier. Emma had put up a brief, principled objection to missing whatever was happening at the grown-up table, and then been redirected by the mention of Mrs. Patterson's banana bread, which she regarded as one of the genuinely non-negotiable pleasures of her life. The house was quiet. He turned the notebook around and pushed it across the table to Vivian, pointing to the line about D. She read it. Her face did what it always did when she was processing something. Went very still, like everything was happening internally and the surface was just holding. "Who's D?" she said. "No idea. Someone she trusted enough to call. Someone who knew what she was working on and told her to stop." He leaned back in his chair. "She didn't stop." "No," Vivian said. "She didn't." She was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, from what I've read of these notes, she was right not to. What she built here is extraordinary. This level of documentation from open sources and human intelligence with no institutional backing. She shook her head slightly. "She did this alone." "She always worked alone," Logan said. "She said sources dried up when more people were involved. She said the story got heavier the more hands were on it." He paused. "I used to argue with her about it. I thought she was just—" He stopped. "What?" "I thought she was protecting herself from the possibility that someone else would get to it first. Like holding the story close was about pride." He looked at the notebook spread across the table. "I was wrong. She was protecting it because she knew someone would try to kill it. She just didn't know they'd try to kill her." The words sat in the room for a moment. Vivian didn't offer anything in response to that. She didn't fill the space with condolence or correction. She just let it be what it was. And somehow, that was the right thing. "I need to find D," Logan said. "We need to find D," she said. "And we need to verify the financial documentation before we take any of this anywhere, because right now we have the notes of a dead journalist and no institutional chain of custody on any of it. Your SEC contact. Nina Vasquez. She was my roommate for 2 years at business school. She went into government when everyone else went to banks. She used to say she wanted to be on the right side of the argument." Vivian's mouth curved slightly. "She's one of the most thorough people I've ever met. If Claire's numbers hold up, Nina will know it. And if there's a way to verify the chain of these accounts, Nina knows who to trust with it." Logan nodded. "Can you reach her without going through any of your normal channels?" "I still have her personal cell from 15 years ago, if it hasn't changed." She paused. "She's going to think I'm calling to catch up." "Are you not catching up?" "Catching up usually involves less financial fraud and imminent personal danger." "Fair," he said. She picked up her phone and looked at it. Something crossed her face. A flicker of something he hadn't seen from her before. A small, private doubt. She pushed it back down quickly, but not quite quickly enough. "What?" he said. "Nothing. You just made a face." "I don't make faces." "You made a face, Vivian." She set the phone flat on the table and looked at it. "I've spent the last 15 years making decisions by myself," she said. "Big ones, the company, acquisitions, firing people, moving money around." Her finger was resting on the edge of the phone. "I've always known exactly who to trust and who not to, because I kept my circle so small that the question barely came up." She looked up at him. "I've known you for 12 hours. 11 and a half, he said. "Give or take." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Right. And I'm sitting in your house, in a town I'd never heard of 48 hours ago, about to call one of the few people in the world I genuinely trust with something like this, because a man I've known for 11 and a half hours asked me to." She shook her head. "I'm not used to operating this way." "Neither am I." he said. My last year of operating was arguing with tile contractors and making sure Emma didn't miss the school bus. And yet here we are. And yet here we are. She picked up the phone and dialed. Guts. Nina Vasquez did not answer on the first call. She answered on the third, at 8:47 in the evening, sounding slightly breathless, and said, Vivian Sterling, I swear I was literally thinking about you last week, before Vivian could say anything. Logan sat across the table and tried not to obviously listen, though the house was quiet enough that he could hear both ends of the conversation without trying. Vivian gave her a condensed version in about 4 minutes. The foundation, the documentation, the scope of what Claire had assembled. She did not explain the hotel or Logan or the message on Claire's phone. She said she had come across the research through a source she would explain later and needed Nina to evaluate it. There was a long pause on the other end. How long have you had this? Nina said. Since this morning. And you came to me immediately. You're the only person I trust with it. Another pause. Longer. Brightwell, Nina said in a tone that had shifted into something more careful. Vivian, I need you to listen to me. I can't discuss any active matters. You understand what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying, Vivian said very carefully. But I can say that if someone put solid documentation in front of me through the appropriate channels with a verified chain of custody, that would be significant. She paused. Do you have original source material? I have notebooks, printed documentation with notations. I need someone to verify the financial paper trail independently. How soon can you get it to me? I can be in D.C. tomorrow morning. Don't use your regular car, Nina said. Don't schedule it through your assistant. Just come. A beat. And Vivian, be careful. If this is what it sounds like, the people who've been sitting on it are not going to be happy about it moving. I know. I mean that more specifically than you might think. Vivian looked at Logan. I know, she said again, and something in her voice had flattened slightly in a way that meant she understood the full weight of what Nina was not saying. She ended the call. She knows something, Logan said. She's at the SEC. If there's been any preliminary look at Brightwell, she'd know. She can't confirm it to me, but she flagged it hard enough. Vivian set the phone down. D.C. tomorrow morning. Can Derek stay with Emma? Logan had already been thinking through that. Yes, I'll ask him tonight. He looked at the notebooks. I want to bring everything that's portable. The notebooks, the printed records. Not copies, the originals. Agreed. She was quiet for a moment. There's something I need to tell you about Brightwell. He waited. Marcus Vance approached Meridian Systems 14 months ago about a partnership. His foundation wanted to use our data infrastructure for what he called a transparency initiative, tracking charitable fund disbursement in real time, supposedly. It was framed as a public good project. Very compelling pitch. She paused. I turned him down. Why? Because nothing about the financial terms made sense for a public good project. He was offering too much. When someone offers you too much for something, it's because they need you for a reason they haven't told you. She had the flat, slightly tired look of someone who had learned that lesson the expensive way. I declined politely, and I didn't think about it again. Until now. Until now. She glanced at the notebooks. He wanted access to Meridian's infrastructure. My company handles data processing for about 40 government agencies, transportation, health services, several layers of financial oversight architecture. She paused. If someone had access to those systems, they would know in advance when audits were being flagged. They would know when a transaction trail was getting close to anything sensitive. They'd have warning before anyone came for them. Logan thought about that for a moment, the full shape of it. He wasn't just stealing money from charities, he said. He was building a system to protect himself from getting caught. And when that system required a technological component he didn't have, he tried to buy access to mine. Her jaw tightened slightly. When I said no, he found another way, and I think what Claire was close to at the end wasn't just the financial fraud. I think she was close to the access network, the people he'd bought, the infrastructure he'd built. Which is why they couldn't just discredit her, Logan said. They had to stop her. The word stop sat between them, both of them knowing exactly what it meant in this context. Logan looked at his hands flat on the table. He killed her for it, he said. Not a question, not a discovery, just the fact of it, finally sitting still long enough to be looked at. We don't know for certain yet, Vivian said, quietly, carefully. We know enough, he said. He wasn't angry, exactly. He'd expected anger, had been bracing for it since the moment in the attic when he'd read the red ink warning. What he felt was something more structural than anger, something that went deeper into the load-bearing parts of him. It was the feeling of a thing you had been carrying without knowing you were carrying it, settling finally into its real weight. He pushed his chair back and went to the kitchen and stood at the window again for a minute, looking at the backyard. The yard where Emma had learned to ride her bike. The yard where Claire had planted tomatoes she complained about every summer and tended obsessively. He heard Vivian come into the kitchen behind him. She didn't say anything. She got a glass of water and leaned against the counter in a way that managed to be present without being intrusive. She left Emma a letter, he said, without turning around. Claire. There was an envelope in her desk with Emma's name on it, dated 3 weeks before the accident. He had found it 8 months after Claire died, going through the desk finally, and he had read it once and put it back in the envelope and left it in the desk drawer where he'd found it. I've never opened it. I thought... He stopped. It's for Emma. She wrote it for Emma. Did you ever wonder why she wrote it? Vivian said. He turned around. She was looking at him steadily over the rim of her water glass. I told myself it was something she did periodically, he said. She had a thing about contingencies, planning for bad outcomes. She used to say it wasn't pessimism, it was just good math. He paused. I convinced myself that's what it was. But she wrote it 3 weeks before she died. The same 3 weeks when she wrote that she thought they were watching the house. He looked at Vivian. She knew. She knew something was coming, and she wrote Emma a letter, and she kept working anyway. Vivian was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was very measured. She had a choice at that point, she said. Probably not a comfortable one. Walk away and be safe, or finish it and take the risk. She set down the glass. The fact that she kept the documentation, assembled the archive, organized it so that someone could find it later. She wasn't just working, she was making sure that if something happened to her, the work wouldn't disappear with her. Logan thought about that. She was protecting it, he said. She was protecting everyone it was meant to protect, Vivian said. The kids those charitable funds were supposed to reach. The families who donated thinking they were helping someone. She paused. She couldn't walk away not because she was reckless, but because she knew what walking away meant. And she wasn't someone who could live with that. Logan exhaled slowly. No, he said. She really wasn't. He went back to the table and picked up the last notebook, the one with the most recent dates and the red ink entries. He turned to the final page of actual writing. Claire's last entry dated November 3rd, 6 days before the accident. Everything is assembled. If something happens to me, it's in the archive. Logan will find it if he knows to look. He'll need to look in the right place. And then below that, in handwriting that was slightly less neat than usual, like she had written it quickly, I love you, both of you. More than I ever got around to saying as often as I should have. That's the thing I regret most. Not the story, never the story. Just the ordinary days I was too distracted to be completely in. Logan read it twice. He did not try to move past what it felt like. He closed the notebook and put it flat on the table. She left us instructions, he said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. An archive. She says I'll know where to look if I know to look. He frowned. I don't know what that means yet. Vivian was reading something on her phone. She looked up. It might not be in the house, she said. If she thought the house was being watched, she wouldn't have left anything sensitive here. It would be somewhere else. Somewhere I'd know, Logan said. Something specific to me. He tried to think. Claire's routines, her habits, the places she went and kept returning to. There had been a storage unit early in their marriage when they were between apartments. She'd kept things there. He had forgotten about it until right now. He didn't even know if she'd kept the lease. I might know, he said. Tomorrow, after DC, I need to check something. Derek came back with Emma at 9:15. Emma was carrying a Tupperware container of Mrs. Patterson's banana bread with the focus of someone transporting something irreplaceable. She looked at the notebooks and documents covering the dining room table with 8-year-old curiosity and the particular quality of judgment that children exercise when they suspect adults are not being entirely forthcoming. "Are you in trouble?" she asked Logan. "I'm working on something," he said. "A problem." "Is it a big problem?" "Medium," he said. "Getting smaller." She considered that. Then she looked at Vivian, who was still at the table, and said with the directness of someone who had decided to stop circling a thing, "Are you staying here?" "Just tonight," Vivian said, "if that's all right." Emma thought about it with the gravity she brought to most decisions. Then she said, "You can have the guest room, but the window sticks and you have to pull it hard or it doesn't close all the way." She set the Tupperware on the counter. "And the banana bread is not for guests, it's for family. But you can have one piece because of your face." She said this last part with such complete matter-of-factness that Vivian sat very still for a moment. "Thank you," Vivian said. Emma nodded, satisfied, and went to find her pajamas. Logan caught Derek's eye across the room. Derek was doing that thing where his face was very neutral and expressive at the same time. The look he got when he was filing away something he planned to revisit later in private. "Not a word," Logan said. "I haven't said anything," Derek said. "You're about to." "I'm not about to say anything," Derek said. He poured himself a glass of water. "I'll say things later, much later, when this is over." He looked at the notebooks on the table and then at the ceiling. Claire would have liked her, though, for what it's worth. She had a good eye for people. Logan didn't answer that. He didn't know what to do with it. He went to check the back door instead, made sure the temporary lock Derek had rigged was holding, and stood for a minute in the dark kitchen listening to the house settle around him. Emma's footsteps in the hallway upstairs, the low murmur of Vivian on the phone in the dining room, Derek moving around in the familiar way of someone who knew the house well enough to navigate it in the dark. He was not safe. He knew that. None of them were. Not really. Not yet. Someone had been into this house and gone through Claire's things, and they hadn't found what they were looking for. And they would come back, or they would find another way to come for what they wanted. But standing in his kitchen at 9:30 at night, with his daughter's footsteps overhead and Claire's work spread across his dining room table, and the small, unasked-for comfort of not being alone in it, he felt, for the first time in a long time, like he was moving toward something rather than just holding still. He turned off the kitchen light and went back to the table. There was still work to do. They left for Washington at 5:40 in the morning, before the neighborhood woke up. Derek had moved his truck into the driveway the night before and parked it blocking the view of the house from the street, a small, practical instinct that Logan had noticed without commenting on. Derek was good at those kinds of adjustments. Quiet, unglamorous precautions that didn't draw attention to themselves. He'd spent 8 years in the Army doing exactly that kind of thinking, and it had never fully left him. Emma was still asleep when Logan went upstairs to check on her. He stood in the doorway of her room for a moment, the usual chaos of stuffed animals and library books, and one sock visible from the doorway, while its partner was presumably somewhere in the bedding. She was sleeping with the total physical commitment of children, arms spread, face pressed sideways into the pillow, completely unconscious in a way that adults never quite managed again. He pulled the door half closed and went back downstairs. Vivian was already in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a mug of coffee she had figured out how to make herself, reading something on her phone. She was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. She hadn't had anything else, and her hair was pulled back in a way that was functional rather than considered. The bruise at her cheekbone had darkened overnight from yellow-green to a proper purple. She did not look like someone who had slept well, but she looked like someone who had used the sleeplessness for something, which Logan gathered was more or less her default state. "Nina confirmed," she said, without looking up. 8:30 at her office. Side entrance. "You were up at 5 messaging your SEC contact." "I was up at 3, she said. "The messaging started at 5 because I didn't want to be rude." Logan poured his own coffee and leaned against the counter opposite her. Through the window, he could see the gray pre-dawn of the backyard, the tomato cages Claire had left standing that he had never taken down. "I found something else last night," Vivian said. She set the phone on the counter and looked at him directly. After you went to bed. I went back through the financial documentation, the printed records from the third box, and I found a series of payments that Claire had flagged but hadn't fully traced yet. They go to an entity she labeled only as Conduit 7. She paused. I cross-referenced the account numbers against Meridian's public compliance filings from 2 years ago, documents I know intimately because I signed off on them. 2 of those account numbers appear in a data set that Meridian processed as part of a routine government contract. Logan was quiet for a moment, working through that, meaning someone inside a government financial structure was running money through accounts that touched your company's infrastructure. Meaning someone inside a government financial structure had positioned themselves so that if the trail was ever followed, it would lead into Meridian's data environment before it led anywhere useful. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it was something tightly compressed. I was being used as a firewall, without my knowledge. My company's legitimate compliance work was being used as camouflage for their transactions. That's why Vance wanted access to Meridian directly, Logan said. He already had a passive link. He wanted an active one. So he could close the loop entirely, so that if any investigator followed the money far enough, they'd hit Meridian's infrastructure and have to stop and deal with me before they could go further. She picked up the mug. Using a billion-dollar tech company as a money laundering buffer is either very clever or very stupid, depending on whether you get caught. Claire was about to catch them, Logan said. Yes. Vivian drank the coffee. And now there's a paper trail connecting my company to their accounts. Which means if this goes wrong, if we get this to Nina and something leaks before she can act on it, I'm not just a witness. I'm a suspect. Logan looked at her. She was holding the mug with both hands and staring at the middle distance with the expression of someone calculating the full perimeter of a problem they are standing inside. Is that why you're really in this? He said. To protect Meridian? She looked at him. The question sat between them without apology. At the beginning, she said. Maybe partly. At the beginning, I wanted to understand the exposure. She set the mug down. But I read your wife's notebooks last night. All of them. Not just the financial sections. She was quiet for a moment. She interviewed families of children in the health programs Brightwell was supposedly running. She has transcripts in the second box. A mother in rural Arkansas whose daughter was enrolled in a clinical trial program that Brightwell claimed to be funding. The trial was real. The funding never came. The hospital ran out of resources mid-treatment. She stopped. Claire has the full interview, the mother's name, and everything. Logan hadn't gotten that far in the notebooks yet. He looked at the ceiling. So, no, Vivian said. It's not just about Meridian anymore. Derek came through the back door with the particular alertness of someone who had been outside checking the perimeter at 5 in the morning because that was the kind of person he was. He looked at both of them. Car's clear, he said. I borrowed Mrs. Patterson's Subaru. She thinks we're going to pick up materials for the Hargrove job. He looked at Logan. You're going to owe her a lot of banana bread. Story of my life, Logan said. Tien. They took Route 1 into D.C. rather than the interstate, Derek's choice, because the secondary road had more turnoffs and less camera infrastructure. Logan had not thought to think about camera infrastructure. Derek had apparently been thinking about it since last night. Vivian sat in the back with the box of Claire's documentation on the seat beside her, one hand resting on top of it in a way that was not quite possessive but was clearly intentional, like she was making sure it didn't go anywhere. Tell me about Nina, Logan said. He was riding in the passenger seat, watching the edge of the road go by in the gray early light. She's careful, Vivian said. Meticulous. She's the kind of person who checks the footnotes of the footnotes. When she was at school, she once failed an assignment on purpose to prove a professor had given her an A without reading it. She almost smiled at that. She's been at the SEC for 11 years. She's turned down 3 private sector offers that I know of, all of them from firms that would have made her significantly wealthy. She wanted to be on the right side of the argument, Logan said, remembering. Yes. A pause. She's also someone who, if she tells you to be careful, means considerably more than the words suggest. Vivian looked out the window. She said it twice on the phone last night. I've known Nina for 15 years and she has never once said something twice unless she needed to be sure it landed. Logan thought about that for the rest of the drive. Oh, Nina Vasquez's office was on the fourth floor of a building that was deliberately unremarkable, the kind of federal building designed to be forgotten as soon as you looked away from it, all smooth concrete and narrow windows. The side entrance she had specified was a fire door accessible from a parking structure, which meant no lobby cameras, no sign-in sheet. She was waiting just inside the door. She was around Vivian's age, compact, with close-cropped hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the look of someone who had been processing information since approximately 4 a.m. She glanced at Logan and Derek with an expression that was not unfriendly, but was clearly doing a rapid assessment. "You didn't come alone," she said to Vivian. "They're with me." Nina looked at Logan specifically. "You're the journalist's husband." He stopped. "How do you know that?" "Because Claire Mercer made contact with this office 14 months ago," Nina said. "She sent a preliminary inquiry, anonymous, but with enough specificity in the documentation she attached that we flagged it as credible." She pushed open the door to a stairwell and started up. She was supposed to come in for a follow-up meeting. She died 3 weeks later. Logan followed her up the stairs with the feeling of the floor tilting slightly beneath him. They went to a conference room on the fourth floor with the blinds already drawn. Nina set a folder on the table and sat down and looked at the box of documentation Vivian placed beside it. "The inquiry she sent," Logan said as evenly as he could. "What happened to it?" "It was logged, assigned to an analyst, and then the assigned analyst submitted a recommendation to deprioritize pending additional source verification." Nina's voice was flat in the way of someone describing something they found professionally unsatisfying. "The analyst who made that recommendation left the SEC 8 months ago. He now works for a financial consulting firm." She paused. "A financial consulting firm that has Brightwell Foundation as one of its clients." The silence in the room had a specific texture to it. "So someone inside your office buried it," Derek said from the corner where he'd positioned himself with his back to the wall. "I can't characterize it that way officially," Nina said. "I can say that the inquiry was handled in a manner inconsistent with our standard protocols, and that I became aware of this discrepancy approximately 6 weeks ago, which is why I have been conducting an unofficial review of anything tangentially connected to Brightwell since then." She looked at the box of documentation. "And why I'm meeting you in this room at 8:30 in the morning through a fire exit." Vivian opened the box. She laid the notebooks out first, then the printed documentation in organized stacks. Nina watched the material accumulate on the table with an expression that was calibrated and careful, but Logan caught the moment when she got to the stack of wire transfer records, and her eyes did something involuntary. A small widening, a rapid intake of breath that she controlled almost immediately. Almost. "This is the full archive," Vivian said, "or most of it. There may be more." "There is more," Logan said. "Claire's last entry says she had an encrypted archive, a complete record, documents, recordings, transactions. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to find it today." Nina looked at him. "When you find it, don't bring it here," she said. "Not yet. I need to secure this material first and establish a clean chain of custody before anything else comes into the official environment. If I move too fast and the wrong person sees movement, whatever you have gets buried again, and the people doing the burying get advance warning." She was already pulling the wire transfer records toward her. "I need 48 hours, 72 to be safe." "We may not have 72 hours, Vivian said. "They broke into his house already. They know we have the notebooks." "I know." Nina looked up from the documents. "Which is why I need you to find the encrypted archive and keep it somewhere none of us can be connected to. And why you both need to be very careful about where you go and who you talk to between now and when I'm ready to move." "How many people do you trust inside this building?" Derek said. He was looking at her steadily from the corner. Nina thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "3, she said, "including myself." "Then we're doing this with 3 people and whatever we can put together on our own," Derek said. He looked at Logan. "Tell me about the storage unit." But Logan had been turning it over the whole drive up. The storage unit, a climate-controlled place called Harmon Self-Storage on the east side of Clarkton, where he and Claire had kept things during the year between selling their first apartment and buying the house. He had cleared his side of it years ago. He had assumed Claire did the same. He had never checked. He paid the unit's monthly fee automatically from a joint account that he had not closed, the way he had not canceled Claire's phone plan, the way he had left the tomato cages in the backyard. $112 a month, charged to a card he rarely looked at, for 2 years, and he had never once asked himself why. The property manager at Harmon Self-Storage was a heavy-set man named Gerald, who had the unhurried quality of someone who had been working the same desk for 15 years and intended to work it for 15 more. He looked at Logan's ID, looked at the rental agreement, and said, "Unit 44, sure, you're on the lease, go ahead," and buzzed him through without ceremony. Unit 44 was at the far end of a corridor that smelled of concrete and recycled air. The padlock was a combination type, their old apartment combination, 7241, the year they'd first met and the floor they'd lived on, the kind of combination that was functionally meaningless to anyone but them. Logan stood at the door for a moment with his hand on the lock. Vivian was beside him. Derek had stayed outside in the car with a sightline to the street, which was Derek's way of saying he was security whether anyone had asked him to be or not. "You okay?" Vivian said. "Ask me in 5 minutes," he said. He opened it. The unit was 8 by 10 feet. On the left side, a set of metal shelving held a collection of items that Logan recognized immediately as Claire's. Archive boxes, the kind with lids and labels stacked neatly. On the right, a portable hard drive sitting on a small folding table, plugged into an extension cord that ran to an outlet in the wall. And beside the hard drive, a sealed envelope, his name on the front. Her handwriting. He did not touch it for a moment. He stood in the middle of that 8 by 10 room and breathed. "It's here," Vivian said softly. She was looking at the hard drive. "She set this up." "She paid for the power outlet," Logan said. "That's a separate add-on at these places. I used to complain about the cost when we were renting it. She must have come back here and set this up and never told me." He was not entirely in control of his voice and made no particular effort to be. "She kept the drive charged for 2 years. He picked up the envelope. His name, written in the particular way she wrote it, the L slightly taller than necessary, a holdover from the cursive she'd learned as a kid and never entirely dropped. He turned it over, sealed, untampered. He opened it. The letter inside was 2 pages, handwritten front and back, dated the same week as the final notebook entry. He read it standing up in the fluorescent half-light of the storage unit, and Vivian stood beside him and did not make a sound. Claire had written it the way she wrote everything set, without preamble, without softening, direct but not cold. She explained the drive, explained the encryption key which she had worked into the letter in a way that was embedded in the language itself, something he would recognize and a stranger wouldn't. She explained that the archive contained everything. The notebooks digitized, the original source documents, 3 audio recordings she had made of phone conversations with Brightwell executives, and a set of transaction records that she had obtained from a source inside one of the shell companies who had eventually trusted her enough to hand over what they had. Then, in the last paragraph, her handwriting changed slightly. The same thing he had noticed in the final notebook entry, that slight loss of precision that meant she was writing quickly or writing through something. "I need you to know that I finished it. Whatever happens, I've finished it. It's all here and it's real and it's enough. What you do with it is up to you. I can't make that choice for you. But I left it because I believe you'll know what the right thing is. And I believe you'll do it even when it's hard. You always have. Tell Emma I was thinking about her. Tell her I was always thinking about her. The rest I already said in the other letter. You'll know when she's ready." Logan folded the letter carefully along its original creases and put it in his inside jacket pocket, where he carried Claire's phone. He stood still for a moment. Just a moment. Vivian did not touch him and did not speak, and that was exactly right. Then he picked up the hard drive. They were 20 minutes outside Clarkton when the first sign appeared that someone had been watching the storage facility. Derek saw it first, a silver sedan that had been 2 cars behind them since the facility parking lot, maintaining the same steady distance through 2-lane changes and a roundabout that most local drivers cut through at a different angle. He mentioned it the way he mentioned most things, quietly and without drama, and then changed routes without being asked. "How long?" Logan said. "Since Harmon," Derek said. "Maybe before." Vivian turned in her seat and looked through the rear window with a steadiness that Logan found disproportionately reassuring. One person in the front. I can't see anyone else. One person visible, Derek said. He took a series of turns through the older part of town. Residential streets, slower, more variable, the kind of grid that didn't have a clean, logical path through it unless you'd grown up there. Derek had grown up there. The silver sedan followed for 2 more turns, then overshot a right and was gone. He'll reacquire, Derek said. He's just not local. Pull over, Logan said. I need to think. Derek pulled into the parking lot of a tire shop that wasn't open yet and cut the engine. They followed us to the storage unit, Logan said. They may not have known what was in there before, but they know we went. They know we have something. They had the storage facility under surveillance, Vivian said, which means they knew about it before we did, or they found it when they went through your house and found the rental documents. Logan thought about the filing cabinet, the slightly wrong angles of the replaced folders. They had been looking for the archive's location, not the archive itself, because they didn't know what form it took. And somewhere in Claire's papers, accessible to someone who knew what they were looking for, there had been a reference to the unit. They know we have the drive, he said. And they know we went to D.C. this morning. They may know we met with Nina, Vivian said. Her voice was careful. If they have any connection to the SEC, which we know they do, and if someone in that building saw an unusual morning meeting flagged, Nina's in danger, Logan said. Vivian was already on the phone. Nina picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been expecting the call. I know, she said, before Vivian said anything. I had someone in the building ask about the conference room booking. Don't come back here. Are you safe? For now, Vivian said. Are you? A pause that was a fraction too long. I'm moving the documentation to an off-site location this afternoon. I have a protocol for this. Another pause. Vivian? I found something in the wire transfer records while you were driving. One of the account signatories on the Conduit 7 payments. She stopped. It's a federal judge. Active. District court. Vivian closed her eyes for 1 second. Who? I'm not saying it on this phone, but when I say the access network goes high, I mean considerably higher than mid-level executives. Her voice had the careful compression of someone speaking from inside a situation that has just become substantially more serious. You need to find a journalist, someone outside any institution connected to these people, someone with a platform big enough that when this goes public, it can't be killed. Claire was that journalist, Logan said. He hadn't meant to say it aloud. There was a brief silence on the call. Yes, Nina said quietly. She was. Find someone who can carry it the rest of the way. A pause. And be careful. I mean that. She ended the call. The 3 of them sat in the parking lot of the closed tire shop while the morning traffic built up on the street beside them, and the silver sedan was presumably circling somewhere nearby. Patient in the way that people who do this for a living are patient. Logan had the hard drive in his lap. He was holding it with both hands, the way he'd held Claire's letter, not clutching it, just holding it, aware of its weight. A federal judge, Derek said from the front seat. Not a question, just saying it aloud the way you said something aloud to hear whether it sounded as serious outside your head as it did inside. It sounded exactly as serious. The people Claire was coming after, Logan said slowly, weren't just executives stealing from a charity fund. They had built something, a structure, people in the right positions to protect the structure, financial systems, oversight bodies, legal infrastructure. He looked at the hard drive. She called it an access network. She was right. That's exactly what it is. Not just money flowing in the wrong direction. Influence, positioned at every point where someone might try to stop the money. Which is why it survived 2 years after she died, Vivian said. Because the people whose job it was to stop it were on the payroll. And why they're still moving, Derek said. Because we're not institutional. We're not coming at this through any of the channels they've bought. He looked in the rearview mirror at the empty street behind them. We're just 3 people in a borrowed Subaru. 4, Vivian said. Nina. Derek thought about that. 4 people in various vehicles, he amended. Logan looked out the windshield at the ordinary morning street. The tire shop, a dry cleaner, a diner with a hand-lettered special on the window. All of it ordinary. All of it unchanged from yesterday and the day before. Claire spent 3 years building a case that no institution would touch, he said. She built it anyway. She finished it anyway. He looked at the hard drive one more time and then placed it carefully in the seat back pocket in front of him. We're not stopping now. Derek started the car. There's a diner 2 blocks up, he said. We're going to sit down and eat something and think about who carries this story, because we can't do what Nina said without a name. And you both look like you haven't eaten since yesterday. I haven't, Vivian said. Neither have I, Logan said. I had a granola bar at 4 a.m., Derek said, pulling out of the lot. So I'm doing the best of all of us, which is not saying much. It was the most normal thing anyone had said in 16 hours, and Logan felt the small, almost physical relief of it, the reminder that the ordinary world was still out there, running parallel to all of this, waiting. He held on to that as Derek pulled into the diner parking lot, because he was going to need it for what came next. The diner was called Patsy's, and it had been on that corner for 30-some years, the kind of place where the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs and the menus were laminated and slightly sticky, and nobody looked up when you walked in. Logan had eaten here maybe 100 times over the years. It felt strange to sit in a booth he recognized, at a table where he and Claire had once argued about whether to repaint the house, and feel like a person whose life had become something he did not entirely recognize. He ordered eggs he didn't particularly want, because Derek was right. He needed to eat something, and sat with his hands around the coffee mug and tried to think clearly. The journalist, Vivian said. She had ordered only coffee and was holding it the same way he was, both hands, like warmth was the point rather than caffeine. Nina's right. We need someone with a platform and independence. Someone who can take Claire's archive and run with it publicly fast enough that it can't be killed. It has to be someone outside the financial press, Logan said. The financial press is too connected to the institutions involved. One phone call from the right person and a story gets held, spiked, quietly buried. He thought about how Claire had talked about editors over the years. Not bitterly, but with a clear-eyed understanding of the pressures that operated on any newsroom with advertisers and board members and relationships to maintain. It needs to be investigative, national reach, someone who's already demonstrated they can take on institutional power and survive it. Derek was eating methodically, the way he ate everything, without particular enjoyment, but with the focused efficiency of someone fueling a machine. You're describing about 4 journalists in the whole country, he said. 3, Vivian said. One of them retired last year. She set the coffee down. There's a woman named Reyes, Pamela Reyes. She's at the National Courier. She broke the Hardcastle defense contracting story 3 years ago. That story put 2 undersecretaries of defense under federal investigation. She is not afraid of institutions, and she does not get spiked. She paused. I've never met her, but I've read everything she's written. Can you reach her? Logan said. I can find a way to reach her. It'll take a few hours. She looked at him across the table. There's something else we need to talk about first. He waited. Last night, after I found the Conduit 7 connection to Meridian, I ran a broader search through my company's compliance archive. Her voice was steady and deliberate. I found that the passive link between those accounts and Meridian's infrastructure wasn't incidental. It was constructed. Someone from inside Meridian set up the data routing that created that connection. She paused. I don't know who yet, but there is someone inside my company who has been working with them. Logan looked at her. How long have you known? Since about 3 this morning. And you didn't say anything? I'm saying it now. She was not apologetic about the timing, and he didn't push it. He understood the instinct. You turned something over carefully before you put it on the table, especially when it was about your own house. It narrows the field. Only 8 people at Meridian have access to the compliance routing architecture. My security team can identify who made those configuration changes, but when I pull that thread, whoever it is will know I'm pulling it. Which alerts Vance, Derek said. Which alerts Vance, she confirmed. So we pull that thread at the same moment everything else moves, not before. Logan thought about the coordination of that, Nina securing the documentation, Vivian identifying her inside source, Reyes receiving the archive and publishing, All of it happening in a window tight enough that no one piece could be used to warn the others. It was the kind of timing that assumed nothing went wrong, which was the kind of assumption that usually didn't survive contact with reality. "There's one more thing we haven't addressed," he said. Both of them looked at him. "The trap," he said. "The hotel. Someone lured us both there and drugged us and put us in that room together. That wasn't just opportunistic. They had a reason." He turned the coffee mug slowly in his hands. "The most obvious reason is compromising photography. Wake up in a hotel room together, there's a story. Vivian Sterling's reputation takes a hit. Her credibility as a future witness gets complicated, and I become someone who can be painted as unstable, grieving, running a vendetta against the people he blames for his wife's death." He paused. "But that's the contingency plan. The primary purpose was something else." Vivian was watching him with the focused attention she brought to things that mattered. "They needed us both out of our houses," Logan said. "Me, so they could search for the journals. You, what were you supposed to be away from?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My server room." He waited. "Meridian's Central Compliance Archive is physically air-gapped," she said. "The only way to access it directly is from a terminal in our DC server room, which requires my biometric authorization in addition to credentials. I'm the only person with that authorization." She was speaking slowly, working through it in real time. "If I was in a hotel room, unconscious, unavailable, and if my credentials had been compromised separately, someone could have gotten into that archive during the window when I was unreachable." "Did they?" Derek said. She pulled out her phone and spent 30 seconds navigating through something. Then she stopped. "There was an access attempt," she said. "At 1:17 a.m., the attempt failed because the biometric override couldn't be spoofed." She looked up. "But they tried, and whatever they were trying to access or delete was probably evidence of the Meridian connection," Logan said. "They wanted to erase the data trail before anyone found it. They needed you gone long enough to get in." "But they couldn't get in without me," she said, "which means the whole hotel plan failed." Something shifted in her expression. Not satisfaction, something more complicated. "Which means they still need to get to that archive, and they know I know about the connection now, or they're assuming I do." "Which makes you the immediate problem they need to solve," Derek said. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being accurate, and all three of them knew it. Vivian put the phone face down on the table and picked up her coffee again. Her hands were steady. Logan noticed them specifically because he was watching for the tell, the small physical sign of fear that most people couldn't fully suppress, and they were steady. "Then we move faster than they do," she said. "Oh." They were back in the car at 9:40, heading toward the house to get Emma and reassess their options for where to stay. Derek had already decided the house wasn't safe for another night. Said it the way he said most things, without debate, as a simple statement of operational fact. Logan's phone rang at 9:51. Unknown number. He let it ring once, then answered on the second. "Mr. Mercer." A man's voice, moderate, controlled, with the particular quality of someone who had spent a long time learning how to sound reasonable. "You've been very busy this morning." Logan said nothing. He put the phone slightly away from his ear so Derek and Vivian could hear. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about the nature of what you've gotten yourself involved in," the voice said. "And I think, as reasonable people, we could find a resolution that didn't require anyone to be hurt." "Who is this?" Logan said, evenly. "Someone who knew your wife, actually. Professionally, she was very talented, very committed." A pause. "Commitment is admirable. It's also sometimes a liability." Logan's grip on the phone tightened by a fraction. He consciously loosened it. "What do you want?" he said. "I want you to think carefully about your daughter," the voice said, "about the life you've built, about whether the outcome you're chasing is worth what it costs to chase it." Another pause. Calibrated. "Your wife made a choice. You have the opportunity to make a different one." Derek's jaw had gone very tight in the front seat. Vivian was absolutely still. "You should know," Logan said, "that this conversation is being recorded." It wasn't. But the 2-second pause that followed was instructive. "Mr. Mercer." "Don't call again," Logan said, and ended the call. The car was quiet for a moment. They're scared, Derek said. You don't make that call unless you're scared. They're also watching us closely enough to know what we did this morning, Vivian said. The storage unit, DC, they've been tracking movement. My phone, Logan said. He looked at it. Then he lowered the window and held the phone outside. Derek. Yeah, Derek said. Logan dropped the phone. In the side mirror, he watched it hit the road and skid into the gutter. He felt oddly lighter without it. I have a burner in the glove box, Derek said. 2, actually. Habit. He didn't explain the habit. Logan was grateful he didn't have to ask. Vivian was already removing the SIM card from her phone with the focused efficiency of someone who had thought about what she'd do in this situation at some point before it became necessary. She handed the SIM to Derek, who pocketed it. Emma, Logan said. On it. Derek already had the second burner out and was calling Mrs. Patterson's landline, a number he had memorized years ago, back when memorizing landlines was the kind of thing people still did. Mrs. Patterson answered on the second ring. Emma was fine. Emma was apparently doing a puzzle and complaining that 3 of the edge pieces were missing. Derek told Mrs. Patterson to take Emma and go to her sister's place in Fredericksburg. Said it was just a precaution, said he'd explain later, used the voice he used when the request was non-negotiable, but he didn't want to frighten anyone. Mrs. Patterson, who had known Derek since he was 22 and trusted him the way you trust someone who has never once steered you wrong, said she'd have Emma in the car in 10 minutes. Thank you, Logan said, to no one in particular. Don't thank me yet, Derek said. We still need a place to work from that isn't your house or anywhere connected to Vivian's company. I have a property, Vivian said. Both of them looked at her. It's not in my name. I bought it through an LLC 3 years ago as a personal investment. I've never stayed there. It's never been in any public filing associated with me personally, and the LLC was set up specifically to not be traceable to Meridian. She paused. It's a house on the Eastern Shore, 2 hours. It's clean. You bought an untraceable house, Derek said. I bought a private investment property, she said, through a structure my personal attorney set up. Everyone at my level of exposure does this. Do they? Derek said. Derek, Logan said. I'm not judging, Derek said in the tone of someone who was mildly judging. I'm just noting that there are apparently several ways to live a life. He changed lanes. Eastern Shore it is. They stopped at the house only long enough to grab the portable hard drive from where Logan had secured it, stuffed inside a folded work jacket in his truck bed toolbox, the least likely place he could think of, unoriginal but practical. He was inside the house for less than 4 minutes. When he came out, Derek was watching the street from the driver's seat with the particular stillness of concentrated attention. Nothing happened, which did not mean nothing was happening. They were on Route 50 heading east by 11:15. The Eastern Shore in November was gray and flat and beautiful in the way that empty things are sometimes beautiful. The land unwinding in marsh and field, the sky coming down close to the horizon, the bridges over the bay long and exposed and austere. Logan sat in the back with the hard drive in his lap and Vivian beside him and tried to organize what they had and what they still needed. Vivian reached Pamela Reyes at 11:40. She had called 3 different numbers to get there. A media attorney she knew tangentially, then a news editor at the Courier who owed Vivian a professional courtesy from 3 years prior, and then Reyes herself. The conversation was brief and not particularly comfortable. Reyes was the kind of journalist who heard the word tip and became immediately skeptical, and the kind who heard the name Vivian Sterling and became immediately more skeptical. She wants to know why a tech billionaire is bringing her this story instead of sitting on it, Vivian said after the call. She wants to know what my angle is. What did you tell her? Logan said. The truth, that I'm in the story, that the angle doesn't matter because the documentation speaks for itself and the woman who built the documentation is dead. She paused. She went quiet for about 10 seconds, and then she said she wanted to see the archive. Is she going to run it? She said she'd make that determination after she saw the material. She said she'd need to verify independently, and that would take time. Vivian looked out the window at the flat November marshland. But she asked the right questions. She asked about chain of custody, source protection, the timeline of how the documents were acquired. She asked if there were any institutional conflicts I needed to disclose. She turned back to Logan. She's the real thing. Claire would have known her, Logan said. He was not entirely surprised. The world of serious investigative journalism was not large. I asked her that, Vivian said. He looked at her. She said Claire Mercer had reached out to her 14 months ago. Vivian's voice was careful. She said they'd had one phone call. Claire had described the shape of the story in general terms, didn't give her specifics, didn't give her documentation, just said she was close and she might need a home for it. A pause. 3 weeks later, she heard about the accident, and she said she'd thought about it ever since. She said she'd always wondered. The car was quiet for a long moment. The bridge over the bay came into view ahead of them, pale and long against the gray sky. She was building a contingency, Logan said. It was the same word Vivian had used the night before, talking about Claire's letter. A chain of contingencies. The storage unit, the letter, the contact with Nina, the contact with Reyes. He looked at the hard drive in his lap. She knew she might not make it to the end, so she built a relay, passed the baton to whoever would pick it up. She passed it to you, Vivian said. She passed it to whoever came looking, he said. It happened to be me. They drove across the Bay Bridge in silence. Logan watched the water below them, dark gray-green, the white caps small and consistent in the November wind. Somewhere out there, on the other side of this bridge, there was a house no one connected to them knew about, where they could sit down with Claire's archive and a journalist willing to carry it and whatever was left of a plan. The trap had failed. The archive was in their hands. Nina was moving. Reyes was listening, but the voice on the phone that morning had been composed in the way of someone who had more moves left. And Marcus Vance, a man who had spent 5 years building a network of protection so thorough it had survived Claire, survived 2 years of federal indifference, survived a buried inquiry and a corrupted analyst, was not the kind of person who accepted a failed play without preparing the next one. The house on the eastern shore appeared on the GPS at just under 2 hours from Clarkton, a low cedar-sided structure set back from a narrow road with marsh on one side and a line of bare trees on the other. Isolated, quiet in the way of off-season coastal properties, the quiet of somewhere the summer people had vacated months ago and not yet returned to. Derek pulled into the gravel drive and cut the engine and did the thing he always did. Sat for 15 seconds looking and listening before he opened the door. Inside, the house was cold but clean. Someone had maintained it at intervals in the perfunctory way of property management rather than habitation. The furniture was minimal and the shelves were empty and the kitchen had dishes but nothing in the refrigerator. Vivian turned on the heat. Derek did a check of the exterior. Logan set the hard drive on the kitchen table and sat down and looked at it. He thought about the voice on the phone. Your wife made a choice. You have the opportunity to make a different one. He thought about Claire writing by herself at a desk somewhere, in the months when she knew they were watching, assembling everything piece by piece, with the focused patience of someone who was not going to stop because they couldn't afford the alternative. He thought about Emma at a puzzle table in Mrs. Patterson's car, complaining about missing edge pieces, not knowing any of this. Vivian came and sat across from him. She didn't say anything. She had developed, over the past day and a half, a calibrated understanding of when words were useful and when they were not, and this was a when they were not moment. They're going to come at us directly, Logan said. Whatever the next move is, it's going to be designed to take the archive away, or take us away from the archive. Discredit, disappear, or destroy. He looked at her. We need to move tonight. The encrypted files will take time to open, she said. I need to work through the key Claire embedded in the letter. I know. And Reyes needs 24 hours minimum to look at what we send her. I know. So we need tonight and tomorrow, and we need nothing to go wrong in between. I know, he said again. The word had the weight of someone who understood the odds and was choosing the path anyway. Derek came back in from outside and closed the door and stood there looking at them both with his arms crossed. Perimeter's clear, he said. For now. He looked at the hard drive on the table. So what are we doing? Logan placed his hand flat on the table beside the drive. Claire's hard drive, Claire's years, Claire's relay race passed forward in the dark. We're finishing it, he said, and they got to work. The encryption key took Vivian 4 hours to work out. Claire had embedded it in the letter the way a journalist embeds a source, visible only to the person who knew how to look. It was built from a combination of dates and phrases that meant nothing to a stranger but were immediately recognizable to Logan the moment Vivian read them aloud. The date of their first apartment, the street name of the hospital where Emma was born, a line from a book Claire had given him the Christmas before she died with the note, "You need to read this. Stop putting it off." He had read it finally, 6 months after the funeral, lying on the couch at 2 a.m. when sleep had stopped cooperating. He had not expected her handwriting to be useful in that particular way. The archive opened at just past 4 in the afternoon, the November light outside already going thin and orange through the marsh grass. What came off that drive was 3 years of Claire's most careful work, not just the notebooks they already had, but the full digitized record. Source documents, scanned originals, 3 audio files that Logan could not bring himself to listen to immediately because the first seconds of the first one were Claire's voice, clear and close, speaking into a recorder in a room he didn't recognize, and he needed a minute before he could hear the rest. He stepped outside while Vivian cataloged and Derek made coffee, and the wind off the marsh moved through the bare trees with the low sound of something that didn't care what was happening inside the house. He stood on the back step and breathed cold air and let himself feel the full weight of what was in that house. Claire's 3 years, her patience, her stubbornness, the particular quality of courage that is not dramatic and not loud, but is just someone continuing to do the necessary thing long after it stopped being comfortable. He had spent 2 years grieving her absence. Standing there in the cold, he felt, for the first time, the full presence of what she had been. She had not been perfect. She had been distracted sometimes, lost in a story for days at a time. She had left dishes in the sink and forgotten Emma's permission slips and picked arguments at 11 at night about things that could have waited until morning. She had kept things from him. All of this, kept from him because she was protecting him, and he had not known he needed protecting. He had resented her for a long time, in the early grief, for leaving, as if she had chosen it. He was not proud of that, and he had never said it to anyone, and standing in the cold behind the house on the eastern shore, he finally let go of it, put it down, and left it there. She had not left because she chose to. She had stayed as long as she could and done everything she could with the time she had. He went back inside. "Ready?" Vivian said. "Yeah," he said. "Let's hear it." The 3 audio recordings were the center of everything. The first was a phone call between Claire and a man she identified in her notes only as R.W., a senior accounts manager at one of the Brightwell shell companies, a man who had grown a conscience over 18 months of watching where the money actually went, and who had been feeding Claire documents for 4 months before the call. His voice was nervous in the way of someone doing something that frightened them and doing it anyway. He described in plain language the mechanism by which charitable donations were diverted, not in complex financial language, but in the simple terms of a man who had processed the transactions himself. The amounts, the destination accounts, the instructions he received from above, and the way those instructions were always verbal, always deniable, always stripped of anything that could be traced to the people who gave them. At one point he said, "They call it overhead recalibration. Like it's accounting, like it's just a number moving between columns." His voice had a quality of baffled disgust. "It's $400 million meant for sick kids. That's not a column." The second recording was more complicated. It was Claire, clearly in a public space, the ambient noise of a coffee shop, the clatter of cups, talking to a woman whose voice Logan did not recognize. The woman spoke carefully, in short sentences, with the pattern of someone choosing each word individually. She identified herself only as being connected to a federal oversight body. She said she had seen the Brightwell filing discrepancies flagged internally. She said the flagging had been overridden by someone 2 levels above her. She said she could not give Claire a name, but she could give her a document number, which she did, and which Claire repeated back carefully for the recording. It was the document number that Nina, when they sent her the audio files securely that evening, matched within 20 minutes to a suppressed internal audit from a regulatory body that had never been made public. The third recording was the one that broke everything open. It was Marcus Vance himself. Claire had gotten him on the phone under a pretext, a journalist requesting comment on a puff piece about philanthropic innovation, The kind of story that powerful men agreed to without much scrutiny because it required nothing from them except their own voice and their own certainty. She had let him talk for 6 minutes about mission and impact and the moral responsibility of success. Then, at the 6-minute mark, she had said very quietly, "I want to ask you about Conduit 7. The silence that followed was 4 seconds long. Logan counted it. In those 4 seconds, you could hear Marcus Vance reassessing everything: the call, the journalist, the question, the implications of having answered it all. And then, because he was the kind of man who had talked his way out of everything for so long that it had become reflexive, he made the mistake of continuing to talk. He did not confess. He was too careful for confession. But in the 12 minutes that followed, trying to navigate the question and simultaneously gauge how much Claire knew, he said enough. He referenced accounts by their informal internal names. Names that appeared nowhere in any public document but appeared throughout Claire's written notes. He described the foundation's financial structure in terms that only made sense if you understood the shadow structure beneath it. And at one point, 9 minutes in, clearly calculating that a show of transparency would be more disarming than continued deflection, he said, "The foundation's overhead structure is entirely legal and has been reviewed by independent counsel at every stage." And Claire, without raising her voice, said, "Which counsel specifically reviewed the Harmon Isle account transfers in the 3rd quarter of 2021? Another silence. Shorter this time. 3 seconds. "I think we're done," Vance said. "I think you're right," Claire said. The recording ended there. Logan listened to it twice. The second time he listened to it, he was aware of Vivian beside him and Derek standing in the kitchen doorway and the cedar-sided house around them and the marsh and the empty road outside and all the distance between this moment and the November night on Route 9 when a truck crossed the median. "She had him," Logan said. His voice came out flat and quiet. 3 weeks before she died, she had everything she needed. "She knew it would take time to find the right person to give it to," Vivian said. "So she built the archive and made the contingencies and kept going." She paused. "And then they found out how close she was. They sent everything to Pamela Reyes at 7:18 that evening. The archive files in an encrypted transfer through a secure channel Reyes's editor had set up on her end, accompanied by a document inventory and Logan's written account of how the materials had been preserved and where they had come from. They sent the same package to Nina through a separate channel, as the official evidentiary submission with Logan's signed statement attached. Reyes called back at 9:45. "I've been doing this for 19 years, she said. And she said it the way you say something when you're trying to stay professional and the professionalism is requiring effort. This is the most complete, most carefully assembled piece of investigative documentation I have ever seen." A pause. "Your wife was extraordinary." Logan was standing at the kitchen window with the burner phone pressed to his ear. Outside, the marsh was dark, and the wind had picked up, and the bare trees were moving. "How fast can you publish?" he said. "I need 72 hours to independently verify the core financial documentation and get legal clearance. I have 2 staff reporters who've been backgrounding the Brightwell financials for 6 months. They're going to work through the night." Her voice was controlled and quick. "We go with everything simultaneously. Print, digital, broadcast partners. No advance notice to anyone. The moment it's live, it goes everywhere at once." She paused. "Mr. Mercer, I need you to understand something. Once this publishes, the people involved will move very fast to contain the damage. That may include moving against you and Miss Sterling." I know," he said. "Nina Vasquez's team needs to be ready to move on the legal side the same hour the story goes live. Criminal referrals, asset freezes, protective orders. The window between publication and the first legal action is when things are most dangerous." "Nina knows," he said. "She's been ready for 3 days." "Good." A pause. "And, off the record, and you don't have to answer this, are you okay?" Logan thought about that for a second. The question had a genuine quality to it that he hadn't expected. "I'll be okay," he said. "When it's done." "Yeah," she said. "That's usually how it works." The next 72 hours were the longest of Logan's life, and his life had contained some very long stretches. They stayed at the house on the eastern shore. Derek ran supply runs, food, additional burner phones, a portable Wi-Fi router that wasn't connected to any of their identities. Vivian worked through the Meridian internal investigation, identifying the employee who had configured the data routing, a senior infrastructure engineer named Gareth Howell, who had been with the company for 6 years and whose personal financial records, once Vivian's security team ran them, showed a series of irregular deposits totaling just over $400,000 over 3 years. She fired him by secure message at 2 in the morning on the second night and notified federal investigators simultaneously. She came and sat at the kitchen table after and was quiet for a while. 6 years, she said. He was at my company for 6 years. I promoted him twice. She was looking at the table. I interviewed him personally when he came in. I thought I was good at reading people. You are good at reading people, Logan said. Apparently not good enough. He wasn't stupid, Logan said. He was careful, and he was paid well to be. He sat down across from her. You can't catch everything. That's not a failure of judgment. That's just the math of having 3,000 employees and one person who decided the money was worth it. She looked at him. When did you get good at this? At what? At knowing what to say. He thought about that. I have an 8-year-old, he said. 8-year-olds are brutally good at identifying when you're full of it. You learn to say the real thing or say nothing. Her mouth curved slightly. It was the closest she'd come to an uncomplicated smile in 3 days, and it was brief, but it was real. How is she? Vivian asked. Emma. Derek talked to Mrs. Patterson this morning. She's apparently beaten the banana bread record by making friends with Mrs. Patterson's sister's dog, so she's fine. He paused. She asked if you were okay. Vivian's expression did something complicated that she didn't fully control. She asked about me. She asked if the lady with the bruise was okay, he said. I'm paraphrasing slightly. Right. She looked back at the table. She's 8, and she's been through more disruption in the last week than most adults handle in a year, and she's asking about someone she barely knows. She shook her head slightly. She's going to be something, that kid. Yeah, Logan said. She is. He did not say anything about Claire in that moment, did not point out that Emma's particular quality of attention, the way she noticed people and cataloged them and checked on them without making a production of it, was entirely her mother's. He thought it and kept it, because some things were just for him. The story went live at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Logan was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee when Vivian refreshed the National Courier's page on her laptop, and the headline appeared in the large, unambiguous font of something that could not be taken back. Brightwell Foundation, $400 million in charitable funds diverted over 5 years. Federal arrests imminent. Below the headline, in smaller type, based on documentation assembled by investigative journalist Claire Mercer, with additional reporting by Pamela Reyes and the National Courier investigative team. Logan read Claire's name on that screen and did not move for a long moment. He had thought he would feel relief. He felt something larger and harder to name, a combination of grief and completion and the strange, specific weight of a thing that has been unfinished for a very long time finally resolving into its true shape. It's out, Vivian said quietly. Yeah, he said. His phone, Derek's burner, the one he'd been using for 3 days, buzzed. A text from Nina. Moving now. Everything is in motion. Stay where you are until I give the all clear. And thank Claire for me. He read it twice and set the phone down. The next 8 hours were the kind that you live through without entirely experiencing in real time, events arriving faster than they can be processed. Nina's team executed criminal referrals on 11 individuals simultaneously. Executives, the shell company accountants, 2 state-level politicians whose names had appeared in the later sections of Claire's documentation, and a sitting federal district court judge whose arrest warrant, Logan would later read, was signed at 7:14 in the morning by a colleague who had been informed only 20 minutes before that it was necessary. Brightwell Foundation's accounts were frozen by court order before the markets opened. Marcus Vance was taken into custody at his home in Connecticut at 8:47 a.m., according to the follow-up reporting that Reyes' team was feeding to the wire in real time. Vivian watched the news feed on her laptop with the expression of someone watching a building she had helped construct reach completion. Not triumph, not vindication, just a steady, quiet attention to a thing being finished. At 10:15, Logan's brother called from Fredericksburg. "Emma wants to know if she can come home," Derek said. Logan laughed. It came out differently than he expected. Shorter, slightly ragged, not entirely controlled. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, she can come home. You okay?" "Getting there." "You should cry," Derek said. "Not on the phone, but at some point. It'd do you good." "Derek, I'm just saying. I know you're just saying." A pause. "She would have been proud of you," Derek said. "Just that. Nothing more." He hung up. Logan sat with the phone in his hand for a minute. There's a particular quality to the time after something enormous. The days and weeks when the noise is still loud but the thing itself is over, and you are left to figure out who you are now that you no longer have the crisis to organize yourself around. Logan had experienced this before, in the worst possible version, after Claire died. The shock and the logistics and the paperwork and the people, and then eventually the silence of it. The ordinary Tuesday morning when no one called and nothing needed doing and you just had to be a person in a life that had been rearranged. This was different. This version had an ending. The arrests came in waves over the following 2 weeks. 11 initial, then 7 more as the federal investigation expanded into subsidiary organizations and their principals. Billions in frozen assets moved through court proceedings. Congressional hearings were announced. 3 separate federal agencies opened independent inquiries into the oversight failures, including the suppressed SEC inquiry, which became its own story when documents confirming the deliberate burial of Claire's original submission were entered into the public record. The employee who had made the recommendation to deprioritize Claire's inquiry, the one who had left to work for a Brightwell-connected consulting firm, was indicted in the 3rd week on charges of obstruction and conspiracy. He was, by all accounts, the least significant person arrested. The significance wasn't in him. It was in what his small corruption said about the size of what he had served. Pamela Reyes' coverage ran for 6 consecutive weeks on the front page. She won a journalism award for it the following year and, in her acceptance remarks, spoke about Claire in terms that Logan read 3 times and could not get through without stopping. She called Claire's archive the most complete act of civic journalism I have ever encountered, assembled at personal cost that most of us will never fully understand. Nina Vasquez was promoted to a senior enforcement position 6 months later. She sent Logan a handwritten note that said only, "She was right. It was enough. Thank you for finding it." Gareth Howell, Meridian's compromised infrastructure engineer, pled guilty in exchange for cooperation. His testimony helped close 3 gaps in the financial documentation that Claire's archive had not fully covered. Even the gaps had been anticipated. Claire had noted in one of the notebooks that certain transactions would require an inside source to fully trace, and that she had been working on that source at the time of her death. She had been right about that too. The Brightwell case, as it came to be known in press coverage and eventually in law school ethics courses, was described as a comprehensive dismantling of a constructed fraud ecosystem, not just the theft itself, but the network of protection that had kept it alive. The federal judge who had been arrested was disbarred and eventually convicted on 4 counts. 2 members of a congressional oversight committee resigned before subpoenas could reach them. An international financial crimes task force opened investigations into 3 of the offshore accounts, which led in turn to related investigations in 2 other countries. It was large, and it was slow, and it was not neat. The law is never neat, but it moved, and it kept moving, and the families of children whose treatment programs had been defunded by diverted donations, some of them, not all, the damage was not fully reversible, received restitution from the frozen assets through a court-administered fund that took 18 months to establish and then operated efficiently for years afterward. Logan followed all of it. He read every article, attended 1 congressional briefing as a witness, and gave a deposition that ran 2 days and 47 pages. He did these things with the same steadiness he had brought to keeping breakfast normal and making sure Emma got to school on time. Not heroically, just persistently, because they needed doing and he was the person who could do them. He went back to work in January. The Hargrove renovation, the tile contractor dispute still unresolved, the familiar smell of old wood and drywall dust. The physical reality of a house being taken apart and put back together in a better shape. He had always liked that about the work, the honesty of it, the way progress was visible and real and measured in things you could put your hands on. Emma went back to school. She was quieter for a few weeks, watchful in the way children are when they sense that the adults around them have been through something important and are processing the aftermath. Then she wasn't quieter anymore and was 8 again, with the usual concerns about which socks and whether the library book was due. One evening in February, she came to Logan while he was working at the kitchen table and leaned against his arm in the sideways way she had, not quite a hug, and said, "Is everything okay now?" He thought about that, about what okay meant. "Most things," he said. "Yeah." She considered that. "Is Miss Sterling coming back?" He looked at his daughter. "Why?" "Because you look different when she's around," Emma said, with the absolute directness of 8 years old. "You look more like you." Logan did not have a good answer for that. "I don't know," he said honestly. Emma shrugged, satisfied with the honesty, if not the answer, and went back to her room. Vivian called him on a Tuesday evening in March. She had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Meridian in November. A temporary transition, officially, while the company worked through the legal and public relations aftermath of the Howell situation. Unofficially, she had told him once, she needed to think about whether she had built what she meant to build, or whether she had been so focused on building it that she had lost track of the original question. She had spent the winter in the kind of private, unannounced way that very public people sometimes needed to disappear into. No social coverage, no interviews, work that was quieter and less institutional. She had established the framework for the foundation she had been thinking about since November. Child protection and transparency initiatives, endowed with a portion of her personal assets that was large enough to be significant and specific enough to be credible. She called it the Mercer Foundation. She had not asked Logan's permission for that. She had told him about it after the fact, in December, in a phone call that had been slightly stiff with the formality of someone doing something meaningful and not knowing how to perform the presentation of it without ruining it. He had sat in his kitchen for a long moment after she said the name. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I did it." He had not seen her since the Eastern Shore. 3 months of phone calls and texts that were ostensibly about the case, the legal proceedings, the foundation work, and occasionally about nothing in particular. A photograph Emma had drawn that he sent her without explanation. A long message he sent at midnight about a documentary he had watched that reminded him of one of Claire's stories. A brief exchange about what it felt like to walk through a city that did not know anything enormous had just happened and was just going about its business. The Tuesday in March call was different from the others. She said she was going to be in Clarkton on Thursday for a meeting with the foundation's legal team, which was true. She said she thought she might stop by the house, if that was all right. "Yeah," he said. "That's all right." "Emma might not remember me," she said. "Emma has never forgotten a single thing in her life," he said. "It's honestly kind of alarming." A pause. "Logan?" "Yeah." "I'm not very good at this part," she said. "The part where things are over and you figure out what's next. I've never been—" She stopped. "I've always known what was next. There was always a next thing. I'm not sure I know how to exist in a situation where there isn't one." He thought about that. About the version of himself 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, and a year ago. The man who had structured his whole life around getting through each day, who had made the absence of a future into a kind of discipline. He thought about standing in Claire's storage unit with a hard drive that proved she had thought past her own ending, past her own fear, all the way to the possibility of someone else's beginning. "There's always a next thing," he said. "You just don't always get to plan it." She was quiet for a moment. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he confirmed. "Du." She arrived in the late afternoon, when the light was coming in low and golden through the front windows the way it did in March, when the angle was changing and the days were finally getting longer again. She was driving herself, no Charles, a regular-looking car that was still a nicer car than anything in Logan's neighborhood, but significantly less conspicuous than a black SUV with a tracker on the wheel well. Emma was on the porch before Vivian had finished parking. Logan stood in the doorway and watched his daughter descend the porch steps with the focused deliberateness of someone executing a considered plan. Vivian got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk and looked at her. And looked at her the way adults looked at children they genuinely liked, which was different from the way most adults looked at children, which was mostly with mild alarm and an exit strategy. "Hi," Emma said. "Hi," Vivian said. "Your face is better," Emma observed. "The bruise." "Yes." A small pause. It healed. "Good." Emma considered her for a moment. "Do you want to see the yard? We have a thing in the back. It's my dad's, but I helped." Vivian glanced up at Logan in the doorway. He lifted both hands slightly. "Don't look at me. I have no idea what she's planned." "Sure," Vivian said. Emma led her around the side of the house. Logan followed at a slight distance, watching them walk ahead of him. Emma explaining something with her hands, Vivian listening with the full, undistracted quality of attention she brought to things that mattered to her. And in the late March light, on the back of his house, the thing Emma was so proud of, the tomato cages still standing, but surrounding a small raised garden bed that Emma and Logan had built in February from scrap lumber, filled with potting soil, with 6 small seedlings already coming up in neat rows. Emma had picked the tomatoes. She had announced one evening at dinner that they should plant them again, that the cages were just standing there, being useless, and that her mother had liked tomatoes so they should grow them. Logan had not been able to say no to that logic. "My mom planted tomatoes," Emma said, standing beside the bed. "We're doing it again." She looked up at Vivian. "Do you like tomatoes?" "I do," Vivian said. "We'll probably have too many. We always have too many." Emma said this with the authority of someone reporting established historical fact. "My dad says that's the point." "What is the point?" Vivian asked. "Too many is better than not enough," Emma said, as if this were obvious. "That's what he says." Logan stood at the edge of the yard in the late light and watched Vivian crouch down to look at the seedlings, and watched Emma point at each one with the proprietary pride of a person who had put something in the ground and watched it start to grow. And he thought about Claire's tomato cages standing empty for 2 winters, and about the October afternoon when Emma had come to him with dirt on her hands and a plan, and the particular certainty of a child who had decided that waiting was finished. He thought about the letter in the desk upstairs, the one addressed to Emma, sealed, waiting for the right time. He did not know exactly when the right time was. He suspected Emma would tell him, the same way she told him most things, directly and without much preamble, when she was ready. He thought about the fact that courage was not the absence of fear, and not the dramatic gesture, and not the moment when everything resolved cleanly. It was Claire at a desk at 2 a.m, recording a phone call she might never be able to use. It was Nina making a copy of a document and keeping it somewhere safe, just in case. It was Emma standing in a February yard saying, "Let's plant them again." It was Vivian calling a number she hadn't dialed in 15 years because the story was more important than the risk. It was Logan opening a notebook he had been afraid to open for 2 years and reading what his wife had left for him to read. Courage was just the decision, made over and over, to continue. Even when continuing was hard, especially then. Vivian stood up from the garden bed and looked at him across the yard. Emma was already heading toward the back door, declaring that they needed to bring out the watering can so Vivian could see how it worked. "She's going to make you water the tomatoes," Logan said. "I gathered," Vivian said. "She's relentless." "I noticed." She looked at the garden bed, then at him. Something in her expression was open in a way he hadn't seen before, or maybe had seen, briefly, in the kitchen at 5 a.m. before everything else took over. "You built this." "Emma built this," he said. "I mostly held the lumber." "You know that's not what I mean." He did know. He looked at the yard, Claire's yard, his yard, Emma's yard, the tomato cages that had waited out 2 winters and were finally doing what they were meant for. "Yeah," he said. "I know." Emma reappeared in the back doorway with the watering can, arms out for balance, water sloshing slightly with the effort of carrying it. "Come on," she called. "You have to water them every 2 days or they get sad." Logan looked at Vivian. She was trying not to smile and not entirely succeeding. "Every 2 days," he said. "I'll put it in my calendar," she said. They went to water the tomatoes. The sun was going down over the neighborhood in that particular March way. Low, gold, long-shadowed, full of the specific promise of seasons turning, of things starting again. Emma gave instructions with the authority of someone who had done the research and expected compliance. Vivian watered where she was directed and asked the right questions, and did not perform interest she didn't have. Logan stood in his yard and watched them, and felt the weight of the past 2 years and the past 2 weeks and the past 2 days sitting alongside something else. Something lighter, less finished in the way grief is finished, more open in the way that ordinary life is open. The kind of feeling that doesn't have a name because it isn't a single thing. It's the whole complicated texture of being alive on a particular Tuesday evening with particular people, in a yard that had meant something before and was starting to mean something again. Claire had said it in the letter. Some things don't let you walk away until they're finished. She had been right. She was usually right. But she had also said, in a different letter, written to the daughter sleeping upstairs right now with her puzzle and her library book and her dog-eared certainty about the world, that what she regretted most was not being present enough in the ordinary days. The days that didn't have a story in them. The days that were just the watering and the breakfast and the socks and the too many tomatoes. Logan Mercer had spent 2 years learning to get through the ordinary days. He was beginning, slowly, to learn to live in them again. That was not a resolution. That was not a clean ending. That was just the next true thing, which was enough, and would continue to be enough, one day at a time, for as long as the days kept coming. Emma handed the empty watering can to Vivian with the satisfied finality of someone who has completed a task to standard. "Same time Thursday?" Emma said. Vivian looked at her. Then she looked at Logan. "Same time Thursday," she said.